Hey everybody, welcome. Thank you so much for joining. My name is Matthew. Today we're going to take a look up north at Norway, its government pension fund, and how big is it? Okay, coming back to these economic explainers that I try to do fairly often. This is Norway. The first thing you're seeing on the screen here is the monetary base of Norway. I talk about this fairly often. I have compiled a global monetary base, which I release every quarter. Q2 2023 is going to be released within the next couple weeks. And it is comprised of the largest currencies in the world. And the monetary base as well, that's the thing that's going to compare economically to Bitcoin. It's also the thing that's going to compare economically to the base precious metal of gold or silver. So this is the monetary base of Norway. Now, as you can see, it's quite lumpy. It goes up and down. We're going back to January 1992 here. This is in billion kroner. And how much is kroner? Of course, this has fluctuated throughout the years, but roughly now the value is 10 to 1 to the dollar. So if you see, for example, here, 70 billion kroner monetary base, that's only $7 billion monetary base value equivalent. See a big spike here during COVID when it went up to 350 or 390 billion kroner, or 39, $40 billion equivalent. But that was a brief period. They brought it back down pretty quickly. And Norway does this. They have a very volatile monetary base. It's the only monetary base that I've seen actually that works like this. They have some flexibility to take it up and down sort of at their whim. And cash as well is a component of this. Physical cash is a component of this. And as I've mentioned in a prior video, see the link in the description, Sweden and Norway are the only two countries in the world where I have seen their central bank actually try to to taper off the physical currency balance that they print, cash and coin. But they're the only two countries in the world that are trying, and they're not even necessarily succeeding as of recent months in that. Anyway, you see that it hasn't grown a ton. It's relatively flat. You see, it was 30 billion back in 1992, and it's 70 billion today. So it's doubled in 30 years, which is actually not that large of a growth rate at all. This is the monetary base of Norway, okay? And as I said, a 70 billion kroner or a $7 billion valuation is a very, very small monetary base relative to the rest of the world. You have $5 trillion equivalent plus for the Japanese yen, the Eurozone's euro, Chinese yuan, and of course the dollar. All of those monetary bases are above $5 trillion or so. Norway here usually ranks even last in the world in monetary base size, $7 billion equivalent. Not much at all. Okay. So what's the story with Norway? Why do they seem to have this flexibility with the monetary base to move it up and down at their will? And why are they, a relatively rich country? Most people probably know during the 60s and the 70s, they found a lot of oil and I think shrewdly developed their petroleum industry across the country, and they became a very well-to-do country post-World War II. One of the things that you may or may not have heard is that they also have a pension fund that is backed primarily by petroleum, although, of course, with the green energy revolution, which is usually overdone in the context of what any normal citizen can do. The green energy revolution has made Norway to not even call it a petroleum fund, which they have used to call it. It used to be called a petroleum fund. Now it's called their government pension fund global. And they're trying, of course, to move away from fossil fuels. I say all that just to show a little bit of background, because when I show this, you should be fairly shocked at how large the pension fund is compared to the monetary base, that is the monetary assets of the country. Okay, so here we go again, 70 billion kroner. As of today, relatively flat last 30 years. I'm going to add now the government pension fund global balance of Norway on top. Okay. Now, I said on top, it's actually below. You know, these are stacked values. You can see that the monetary base in black area there is pretty much dwarfed by the green shaded area of the government pension fund global balance. Okay. So if we go back here, it seems to have come on the central bank's balance sheet. I don't think I caught it in this zoom even, not by billions at least. It came in somewhere in the early 90s, early to mid 90s. You can really start to see it at 2 billion kroner or so in May 1996. Then it has a few jumps up to 50 billion kroner. And the monetary base is still bigger at this point. Okay, still bigger in the mid 90s. Let's make the zoom a little bit better here. Okay, the monetary base still bigger all the way up till somewhere in late 1997 with increase in assets of their pension fund. The pension fund gets up to 100 billion kroner valuation. The monetary base still at 60 billion kroner. All right, in late 1997, start of 1998. And it doesn't stop from there. If we zoom back out, you can just see a constant, consistent growth of the pension fund. And again, the monetary base doesn't do anything. Now, why do I combine these two numbers on this chart, right? The monetary base and the government pension fund. Well, that's where actually Norway places the value of this pension fund and accounts for it in their national accounts. Okay, it's not under the purview of the Treasury or the Financial Ministry. It's actually under the purview of the central bank. It's listed there, which is very unique. I am always keen to learn more. So please, if you know anything about other central banks that do this, dear listener, please send me. But I have never seen a central bank, first of all, that puts their pension fund on its balance sheet. And secondly, of course, a pension fund that is this vast, that is this large. Okay, I'm not sure if I even mentioned what the value is today. All right, again, monetary base 70 billion kroner. The government pension fund global, which is the official title now, 15,000 billion, which is 1,000 billion is a trillion, 15.26 trillion kroner. And again, a roughly 10-to-1 exchange rate. That's 1.5 trillion dollars worth of value. And so there's many, many interesting things to say about this. I mean, first of all, this is where the hype lies. Okay, if you talk about Norway, how well it does as a government for its citizens, again, extremely unique. Let's just take some examples of pension funds in other countries. Okay, the United States, famous Social Security system, or Medicare, Medicaid, none of that is on the balance sheet of the Federal Reserve, the central bank. Okay, that's under the purview of the Treasury. None of the pension funds in Eurozone countries or Japan, as far as I know, as far as I recall, is on the balance sheet of the central bank. This is very, very unique and very, very positive for Norwegians because this is an actual asset that the central bank holds on their behalf. Okay, a massive amount of wealth. It's not money. I mean, of course, we colloquially will call it money, right? Norwegians have a lot of money or whatnot. But when you talk about a state level backing of money, this is actually where it is, where it's located, and it is a lot. Okay, and I learned a little bit more about this as well. I was keen to ask some Norwegians during the Oslo Freedom Forum last month when I was up there. And this is, of course, it's a government fund. This is not like everybody's guaranteed a share of this. You know, if someone's hit by a bus tomorrow in Norway, as I understand, I mean, it's not a payout that the family will get or something. It's not a life insurance policy. It's still a government pension fund. And as long as you're alive and you're retired, you will collect this pension. But, you know, it's still a government pension fund. So that should be one thing that's clear. It's not like, you know, X amount of 100,000. I think it works out to something like $250,000 per capita. It's not like 250,000 equivalent in kroner is allocated on some spreadsheet to every single citizen of Norway. That's just not how this pension fund works. No, I mean, once you retire, yes, you have a right to receive some cash flows from it, but it is a state-managed fund. And it's shrewdly managed, I would say, from that perspective. As far as officially coming on the central bank's balance sheet came mid-90s. You know, of course, the Norway oil industry was booming for probably 30 years or so before that. My understanding it happened right around the end of World War II, 50s, 60s, where they really started to develop it. But, at a state level of backing, a sovereign wealth fund, basically a pool of assets for each citizen to draw on when they retire, it's like nothing I think the world has probably ever seen. Again, Social Security for the United States, that is money that it actually went cash flow negative in 2011. It means that they pay out more than they take in taxes every year. But even they do have these what are called trust fund assets on the books of the Treasury. But that money as well is gone. It's already been lent out to other, and that is, there is a balance there, a $2 trillion equivalent, if I recall. Like I said, that money is gone. It's not like that money is sitting managing sovereign wealth assets. It's not managing, oil companies or tech companies or whatever it might be that the Norwegian government pension fund global, which it's called, is managing at the moment. That's not how the United States Social Security Fund works. Okay, if it has drawn a surplus in prior decades, which the United States Social Security Fund has drawn a surplus, that surplus, $2 trillion, again, as I recall, has already been lent out to other government agencies. So the trust fund is simply an asset that one branch of the Treasury has from another, say the military or agriculture or the environmental agencies. But that money's already been gone and spent. So effectively, it needs to be taxed twice. That's the interesting thing about Social Security. Not as familiar with the European funds. As far as I know, none of them exist on the books of the central bank. The central bank is where you have, money, primarily physical cash and coin, and also the reserves for banks. Those are the assets, and that's just central bank money, all right, that's created. But Norway, the Norwegian central bank, is very interesting in that they actually do hold the value of this sovereign wealth fund on their books. As far as how that's managed, I'm sure that's in a different branch of government, the sovereign wealth, the global pension fund agency of Norway. I'm sure that they, manage all the debits and credits and the sales and the trades of shares in different companies, so on and so forth. But the value of this, after fees and everything else, the value of that fund actually sits on the balance sheet of the central bank. So it's pretty wild. Okay. And so you can see now, hopefully after that little bit longer description that I wanted to give, that the monetary base is just dwarfed. The monetary assets of Norway are just dwarfed by the pension or sovereign wealth assets, which are actually backed in real investments. There's actually, real holdings of oil companies, resource companies, tech companies, whatever they're moving into now, which is unlike pretty much any other country that I've seen. So now let's put in total central bank assets. Okay, I haven't shown you that. It's going to be a line on the left axis. How big do you think that's going to be? Almost the same as the sovereign wealth fund. Okay, so let's just zoom in a little bit. I mean, it doesn't really matter where you zoom in. You can see the vast majority now of the Norwegian central bank's assets are its government pension fund, which again is incredibly unique. So where usually the vast majority of the balance sheet, when it's located as a liability, on the assets usually you have government securities that the central bank buys with printed money. But on the liability side, which the monetary base is a liability, usually that's the vast majority of the balance sheet, okay? The cash and coin and the bank reserves. Basically, it's the central bank money. The bank money that the central bank prints usually is the vast majority of the balance sheet. Whereas here, it's a, underwhelming minority. That little black area, again, if I take out the pension fund, look how small that is. Just look how small that is compared to the total balance sheet. So I put the pension fund back, and then I show you a percentage now on the right axis, which is a percentage of the pension fund component of the total balance sheet. You see that it went from, zero basically in the early 90s to already 70% by the turn of the millennium, 60, 70%, to 85% around 2000, 7, 2008, gets over 90% in 2012, and now let's go all the way to today, June 2023. 15.3 trillion kroner of the government pension fund. The total central bank balance sheet is 16.2 trillion kroner. That's 94%. Okay, so a pretty wild growth of value of the Norwegian Sovereign Wealth Fund, the Norwegian Pension Fund, which again, it's a government-run fund, so it's not like everybody gets a share of this automatically. You know, again, if you're hit by a bus tomorrow, your family's not going to get any money. But, you know, it is an interesting state-managed wealth fund, which most governments around the world haven't managed to successfully do for their citizens. So it's good to be Norwegian from this perspective. And I think it's an interesting juxtaposition of the relative value of a balance sheet of a central bank compared to, definitely just check out any of the prior videos that I've been doing. You know, the vast portion of central bank balance sheet value, all right, from the liability side, is cash and coin and bank reserves, which are basically just central bank money that the central bank credits to banks when it buys on the secondary market government securities, treasuries, booms, bonds, gilts from the open market. Okay, this is just how they bring money into existence. That's how they create money. The Norwegians have done it completely differently. Okay, all of the money that comes into society has basically been relegated to a sideshow. Okay, look at how small that monetary base is, and they are, again, famously wanting to be a cashless economy for many years now. And the majority of wealth that the central bank holds on its balance sheet is the pension fund itself. Those actual oil resource tech companies that they own on behalf of their citizens. So very unique, not at all what the United States does. Many other countries around the world, I've just never seen anything like this. So this is the story with Norway. It really is a wild story. You see that it's been built up officially, at least over the last 30 years or so. But they are now at the point where 94-95% of central bank assets are officially allocated to their government pension fund global account to be paid out to citizens once they retire. So resources definitely make the world go round. It's good to control them if you can, and it's even better to allocate them on behalf of your citizens. Perhaps some interesting lessons there from Norway. That's all for today. Thanks for watching.